Hello, everyone. I'll be with you in a moment. Just hold up while I post links. Just again, bear with me. One more. Oh. There we go. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's episode of Paranormal Encyclopedia. I'm, as always, your host, Kevin Mears, demonologist, paranormal investigator, and the Paranormal Encyclopedia. I've got an interesting topic tonight, but I think I kind of should do a content warning. So before I do that, I'm going to just mention, keep in mind, we are gearing up for a second Wrath of Khan 2. The Khan Strikes Back. This point, we're looking at the first weekend in April. It'll be on the sister channel, Wrath of Khan, which is just for the convention. We are still looking for guests. If anybody listening in thinks they might have an interesting panel, feel free to get in touch, either through my email, which should be in the description, or through the Facebook, the Paranormal Encyclopedia. And we can talk about that. But, so I want to give a caveat here before I get into tonight's topic. I do not believe the information I'm about to discuss is in any way dangerous to you or to anyone else. That being said, if I'm wrong, this could lead to a fate worse than death. And even if I'm right, a lot of people have found this idea so disturbing that it makes them physically ill, gives them nightmares, trouble sleeping, and things of that nature. There is at least a hypothetical possibility that simply knowing what I'm going to talk about puts you in danger. I don't think it's a very realistic danger, and I'll explain why after I explain what it is. But it would be dishonest of me not to get into that first. The idea that we're going to talk about tonight is considered what's called an informational hazard. The idea of an informational hazard is really kind of interesting. It's the idea that there's some concept, some knowledge that it is inherently dangerous to be aware of. That knowing something can be a threat to your physical health, your mental health, spiritual health, or all three. This may sound strange, or like some weird occult concept. It's really not. I'll give you some examples of real things that are information hazards. If you knew that someone who was a serial killer, knowing that, particularly if they know that you know that, is inherently dangerous. Because you can go to the cop, serial killers, mobsters, any type of criminal. You know something that puts that person, a dangerous person, in threat of the law getting involved. Knowing any level of classified information can be inherently dangerous, especially if you're not supposed to. You could be arrested, you could go to prison, you could be executed. There may even be there's the other side of it, that there may even be ideas. The idea itself is a danger to you. This is a little harder for people to think of, but probably the best example, and I'm borrowing here more than a bit from Kyle Hill from his show Because Science, who also talked about this exact thought experiment I'm about to get into. But a person who knows, for example, that they have incurable cancer, that they're going to die in the next 6 months, think about the emotional toll that takes on you. You can make an argument that there are positive sides to knowing this because you make the most of the next 6 months. But I think it's safe to say that someone who knows that they're going to die, that there's nothing that the doctors can do about it, is going to suffer from severe depression and anxiety and lots of other issues. So yes, information hazards are a real thing. There are examples all around us. Both, there's the esoteric ideas that we can get into, like knowing how to summon a demon would be an information hazard, assuming demons are real and dangerous. And then there are practical examples. Another practical example, of course, is the exact information on how to build a nuclear weapon or nuclear launch codes. Not the sort of thing you want every person in the world to have free access to, is it? This thought experiment goes a step further, though. It's a concept that knowing about it now is safe. In the here and now of 2021, it is perfectly safe, probably. But it may become dangerous in the future, and not acting based on this knowledge could put you in danger. Which brings us to the concept of Roko's Basilisk. It was developed by a user by the name of Roko, screen name of Roko, on the website Less Wrong in 2010. And hold on, I'm not broadcasting. I certainly should be. Okay, then why am I not having video? There's no reason the video shouldn't be going through. Freaking YouTube. Okay, now inspect for equally lack of unexplainable reasons. It's a basilisk. So at any rate, the thought experiment goes like this. What if at some point in the future we create a true artificial intelligence? What people mean when they talk about the singularity. Not the basic, if-then statements that we call artificial intelligence now that you see in video games or in algorithms, but something that actually was self-aware to the same level that humans are. And if this thing was so powerful, because to create human level intelligence, true sentience, would take a phenomenal level of computing power. But it was able to model human behavior. And it had enough data from people all over history to perfectly model what anyone would do in response to a given series of events. Now, what if humans ask this artificial intelligence to optimize our world, to end world hunger, end world war, all of those dangers, all of those real problems that we have? If we ask this artificial intelligence to step in and resolve them for us, and the artificial intelligence reasons something along the same lines. This is what's in the best interests of humans. But to really optimize situation, we have to eliminate and even punish, potentially. We have to punish anyone who's actively working against or has worked against this goal. Because everybody wants world peace, right? Everybody wants this idyllic utopian society. Or if you don't, there's something wrong with you. And you're a threat because you need everybody on the same page. So based on this series of premises, it reaches the conclusion that it should not only kill everyone who's actively working against it now, but it should retroactively go back and punish everyone who was aware of it as a concept, who didn't actively work towards its creation. Specifically, what if this artificial intelligence was to inflict eternal punishment on anyone who was aware of it as an idea, but did not actively work to create it? If all of this happen, if all of this is possible or true, shouldn't you, dear listener, and me, and everyone else, whoever hears about this idea, actively work to bring it about? It's an interesting idea. I mean, we could get into the larger philosophical concepts of, can true artificial intelligence exist? I'm not entirely convinced that it can, but I may very well be wrong. But what do you do with this information? Do you take it seriously? If you take it seriously, what do you do to bring it about? If you don't take it seriously, do you actively try to work against it, even realizing that there are people that are going to take it seriously and work towards this goal? And if they succeed, you're going to be put through eternal torment. Now, the obvious question I had when I first heard this idea properly explained is, how could it inflict eternal torment? By nature, human life is finite. One explanation, it would be, what if it inserted electrodes into your head and caused you to experience 500, relatively speaking, 500 billion deaths back to back in the most agonizing way possible? This isn't eternal, obviously. It will eventually end. But it would be horrific torment. The problem becomes, and here's why I'm willing to talk about this as a concept. There's two reasons. First is the nature of what this is proposing. Roko, in my opinion, Roko's Basilisk, as described, and I've admittedly simplified it, is proposing the creation of an artificially intelligent God. It has the ability to perfectly predict human behavior. It has the ability to inflict eternal suffering on finite living human beings. Or, alternatively, humans in fact have a soul and is able to torture that in some eternal method. These are qualities. This, to me, implies that humans will have created a deity. It's not a deity. It's close enough for me. I mean, perfectly predicting behavior, perfectly predicting reactions. I know there are people disagreeing. Carl Hill mentions this video that no, he says this is possible. I don't think it is. I don't think it's possible to perfectly model human behavior. Humans are too unpredictable. You can do it with a great degree of accuracy, but every once in a while, humans are going to do something irrational. Particularly, and here's the other problem with artificial intelligence in general. And actually, it's arguably the reason why true artificial intelligence isn't happening anytime in the foreseeable future. To have a functional intelligence, the way that artificial intelligence works, what we can seem to be able to program is logical reasoning. If this happens, then do this. If person has thought X, then person will do, based on genetics and previous behavior, person will do behavior Y. The problem, logical reasoning is good. It's very useful. Let's not pretend it isn't. But it's not the only type of reasoning. And to function in the real world, you need more than purely logical reasoning. Let me give you an example. There are people in this world who, through very different types of brain damage, have lost their capacity to feel emotion. Star Trek fans might think that this would be the ideal circumstance for a purely logical being, that you could now have a Spock. Here's the issue. From an account of a psychologist who was working with a person, or at least a therapist of some kind, was working with a person like this. It's an icy day, person's on the way to the office for their appointment. Car in front of them hits a patch of ice, skids out of control, goes off the sides of the road. The patient stays calm, continues, slows down, matches the speed to what's appropriate, and passes through safely. Which is where this dispassionate, emotionless behavior comes in handy, where someone else might very well have panicked, having seen somebody else spin out of control. They remained calm. Here comes the problem. At the end of the session, talking about, okay, when's the next session going to be? The therapist looks at his calendar. He has 2 dates available. Patient then proceeds to endlessly debate the pros and cons of both dates. They hit a stumbling block because there is no logically better choice. Ultimately, the therapist picks a date for them. I've had friends, when I've explained all of this to them, who've suggested to me that eventually they'll come up with something, even if it's, one date's a Monday and the one's a Wednesday, so Mondays are earlier in the week, we'll go with Monday. But that's not a logical conclusion. To function in the real world, to be a functional intelligence, actually you need the ability to make intuitive choices. You need the ability to make those leaps that require the emotional component. Without emotions, you behave in a very if-then logical progression, which is good for a lot of things, but it doesn't solve all of your problems in life. There are times you need to come up with option C. See the middle ground between two choices. Sometimes you just need to freaking pick something, because otherwise you're going to be here all day. You need that. There are advantages in reasoning to emotion that people don't necessarily see. Artificial intelligence, that's an issue. And for that matter, along these lines, in what way is I need to punish people who didn't take this idea seriously a logical conclusion? I mean, it's not that I oppose the idea of world peace. It's not the idea that I oppose at the end of hunger and these other things. But I would not, even if I had the technical abilities to work on such a program, I wouldn't work on it. I don't see any value. I don't see any purpose in it. I don't see it as possible. And if it was possible, I still wouldn't do it because I'm not a big fan of giving any one thing that much power. Programs have bugs. And if we're giving it true artificial intelligence, it's going to have to have emotion, which means it's going to be able to make this irrational decisions, potentially including the irrational decision of killing us all human beings. Not based on any logic, but based on it thinks machines are superior or whatever. But why should I be? Why? Emotionally, yeah, there you go. That gives you a reason. It's petty. But in which case, where it's not a, and if it's going to be petty, it's not a good argument for giving it this much control, is it? There isn't. It isn't. There's no logical way to reach the conclusion. Torture people. The other more fundamental problem is let's say this happens 150 years from today. It's 2021. So 2071, the Basilisk is born. I'd be 190. 191. I'd be dead. How is it going to torture me? There are two explanations I've seen so far for how this could be done, both of which have big problems. One is that it would be somehow capable of creating time travel. Time travel is a particular stretch in creating this level of artificial intelligence. If you had time travel, why torture people for all eternity or kill people when you could just simply arrange it so they weren't born? Arrange it so that they decided to work on it after all. Or just bring a copy of yourself back in time and have yourself created earlier. Never mind all the logical problems with that. Then there's the other way that it could happen. Well, there's the other possibility, which is horrible, but doesn't affect me in the slightest, which is that they'd for some reason torture my descendants because I didn't do it. So, but again, applying logic to this, are you saying that if it happens, if 150 years from now, my great, etc. grandson is the lead designer on this artificial intelligence, he's going to be tortured for all eternity because I didn't do anything? It's like you're going to torment your own creator. And yes, there's an obvious biblical metaphor here that I'll get to in a minute, or at least after I get through all the logical aspects of this. But there's the other way that torment me, or at least it might seem to some people like you can torment me, which would be the whole idea of the ghost in the machine. Well, if he could so perfectly model human behavior, couldn't he recreate me as a computer program? And if he created me as a computer program, he could torment that computer program, because computer programs are inherently immortal, or at least can be made to be immortal, for eternity, in ways that would never feasibly work with me. So now I'm back to being tortured. Now I'm being tortured in a cyber dungeon for all of eternity in the most horrible way, in ways more horrible than even I can imagine. H.R. Geiger and Clive Barker combined, ways the two of them couldn't even imagine. Sounds pretty horrible again, except for one giant, obvious, glaring problem. It's not me. It's a copy of me. This is, in fact, the entire logical problem with the idea of uploading your brain into a computer. You can't do it. You can make a copy of yourself. Hypothetically speaking, you can make a copy of yourself. But the copy isn't you. Or maybe you could even argue, the you that particularly, here's the thing. If I make a copy of myself today, put it on the internet, a true copy with all of my memories, all my personality, all my thoughts, all my emotions, everything, and I'm still alive, 10 years from now, that copy is going to be very different from me. Assuming we both survive 10 years from now. Because what I will have experienced in the intervening 10 years are going to be completely different from what the copy experiences. Dramatically so, because the copy is going to exist in a form of existence completely different than what I do. Even if you're a materialist who believes there's no soul, that flesh and blood is all there is. Hey, Lisa. It's a copy. It's not you. You are still the individual, distinct person that was copied from. Even if the copying process kills you, then you died and the copy of you now exists. Whatever you do to that copy isn't going to happen to me. Now, if all this is possible, would I want a copy of myself to be tortured? No. Am I responsible for it being tortured? I would also argue no. And again, it makes an artificial intelligence to be able to logically realize that a digital copy of me is not me. And Lisa, actually tonight's topic is the thought experiment known as Roko's Basilisk. It's basically the idea that humanity could create a godlike artificial intelligence that would then retroactively torture for all eternity anyone who didn't help build it. I'm explaining, well, how could an artificial intelligence, if this happens, an artificial intelligence, a godlike artificial intelligence is created 100 years from now after I die, how can it torture me? And the only one way people could argue that it could be done is by making a copy of me, a digital copy of me, that thing could be tortured. And yeah, it's an extremely weird idea. But it's kind of an interesting one, which is why I decided to talk about it tonight. But again, it's not torturing me, it's torturing a copy. And it's ultimately responsible for the torture of that copy since it created it. That's absolutely fair. So no, an artificial intelligence in the future is not going to be able to torture you for all eternity. I don't even think if they created this thing tomorrow, it's not going to be able to torture you for all eternity. Why? Because you're a human being. Human beings die. Even if it could resuscitate your body, which is realistically possible under certain circumstances, eventually your body is going to physically give out and you're not going to be able to survive. And if it does it in some mental way that doesn't damage your body, but makes you feel like your body's being torn apart, bathed in molten lava, ground down to its component atoms, all while you're still aware, reassembled and done over again, one of two things is going to happen. Either one, eventually you're going to starve to death, suffocate, run out of water, or your body is going to shut down from old age, and the experience will end for you. Or two, you're going to, and far more likely, the stress being put on your system is going to kill you. Lisa, actually, while you're here, to let you know, and to mention this again for anyone who joined in now or later and didn't hear about it in the first time, the first weekend in April, so April 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. We're looking to do another online convention. Would love to have you take part in it if you have some time on one of those days. Just let me know. So yeah, this is the idea of Roko's Basilisk. It's the idea of a computer program, a petty computer program. The reality of which being to do all the things that the thought experiment suggests. Essentially, humanity has to create a god. For the convention, it's what do you want to talk about? I've got so far I've got musicians, game designers, several authors all lined up, and I'm working. And some people from the Watchdog community, like Virgo Triad's coming back just like she did last year, and I'm actually trying to get a couple of them together. For that matter, what's his name? Swindle Hoodwinked has already expressed interest in joining us. And I understand that you're still taking care of your dad. I hope things are going well with him. But I wanted to at least let you know that this is something that is in the works. And we just keep me posted, and we'll try to keep room for you. And again, if anyone else is listening who thinks, hey, I have a cool thing I might want to submit for this, let me know. We can talk about it. When I first starting presenting and performing, I wasn't very well known, but people gave me a chance. So even if you have a smaller YouTube channel than mine, and mine isn't very big, or something like that, reach out to me anyway. We can still talk about it. If I think you have something worth sharing with the world, I'd be happy to help you do so. And it doesn't have to be paranormal. I'm not restricting it like that. It just has to be something I think is interesting, fun, or worthwhile. Hopefully all three. But here's the other side of all of this. So, I think it's fair to say, and as I have, that creating an artificial intelligence god is kind of an absurd concept. I don't think it can be done. But the awkward counter to this is a supreme intelligence that knows everything you're going to do that will punish you if you don't serve it properly. Sound familiar to anybody? I'm Christian, and I'll be the first to admit this sounds like the evangelical idea of God. That you worship me, and worship me in the proper way, or you're going to go to hell for all of eternity. Exactly, Lisa. This sounds a lot like Christianity. And I absolutely agree. The conventional form of Christianity, where you are tortured for all eternity, just for not believing in God, is to me, it doesn't make any more. That's not a loving God. To give one of the most obvious and applicable to this thought experiment example. So does that mean that everyone who died before, it's hard to pin down the exact dates, we'll just go AD, about the time that Jesus was crucified. So everyone who died before 33 AD, who had never heard of Jesus Christ, for that matter, everyone who was living in England in 33 AD who never heard of Jesus Christ, all of those people are now being tortured in hell for all eternity for not accepting a set of beliefs they had never even heard of. This is also, this is Roko's Basilisk torturing you for. This is worse than Roko's Basilisk, because Roko's Basilisk is only going to torture the people who knew about it that didn't do something to help bring it about. This is also why this idea is something that a lot of, in my experience, even most evangelicals find deeply uncomfortable. Because there's also the other implication of this. The way that most evangelicals I've met in my life would account for it is they get kind of a pass. They'll be judged on what they did, not on whether or not they believed in God the proper way. Setting aside all the problems with cultural disagreements about morals and ethics, let's take that premise as true. If you've never heard of Jesus Christ or the God of the Bible, he will not judge you on Judgment Day. Seems fair, because how can he be, we're going to decide to send you to prison or not for the rest of your life based on whether or not you can explain, I don't know, Einstein's general theory of relativity when you're asking this to a sixth grader who's never made it out of sixth grade math. That no one would think that's a reasonable thing to do. They'd say no. The sixth grader's gonna get a pass. Okay. In that case, if you get a pass, if you're not aware of this concept, the most immoral thing a person can do, the most evil, the most wicked, the most unkind, uncharitable, callous thing a person can do is tell you about it. You can only be judged by making the choice. You can't be judged if you don't know about the choice. Then no one should talk about it. Because by talking about it, you force everyone to make that decision. And if for any reason they don't make the right decision, again, I'm not advocating that this is the correct theology at all. I'm just trying to point out the logical problem in this line of reasoning. If you don't make the right decision, you are going to suffer the worst torments, in fact, worse than you can conceivably imagine, for all of eternity. It would be immoral to tell somebody about it. They'd be better off never knowing. Because if they don't know, they can't make the choice. If they can't make the choice, they can't be held accountable for making the wrong choice. It also would fly in the face of the entire idea that God is benevolent. And this is, I think, the inherent problem with the idea of traditional evangelical Christianity, where all you have to do is believe and you are saved. And if you don't believe, no matter what you do, you're damned. Because it returns God into a cruel being. There's no way around that. There's a million reasons, if I'm being judged by the Basilisk in the thought experiment, how was I supposed to know this was possible? The whole idea seems on its face ridiculous. How is an atheist supposed to know that the Judeo-Christian God is possible? The laws of physics explain the universe very, very well. And we have no direct hard evidence that God exists. People will argue that the whole idea that proof denies faith, and without faith, God is nothing. If it's so important that people not know that God existed, or not have direct evidence that God existed to be able to have free will. So Satan didn't have free will. So God made Satan fall from heaven. Because Satan and the angels that followed him are supposed to have had free will. How can they have free will? If you can't have free will and know about the existence of God, how do angels that knew that God existed have free will? There are solutions. There are other potential solutions to this, but I ultimately, in my personal opinion, think that faith alone salvation method. Lisa, I would disagree with you because Lisa says even without free will or without God, free will makes no sense. I don't agree at all, actually, and I'll come back to that in a second. Dang it, I lost my train of thought. I'm good at losing my train of thought, as I'm sure my listeners have figured out by now. I've always been of the opinion that God wants humans to love him, but he wants them to be able to choose freely whether they will or not. And it's kind of hard to love a being is standing there with a giant. It's like, love me or else. It doesn't work. Yeah, and it's a friendly disagreement. I'm sure. It's not like, oh, you don't agree with me, you're banned from my chat and not disinvited from the convention. It's like, no, I like disagreement, especially philosophical disagreement, because this is philosophy, not hard fact, is welcome. Especially, we're having a conversation. It's all well and good. But here's the issue I see with why I think free will is a necessary component of understanding human behavior. People generally talk about two major forces that drive what we do. Nature, meaning genetics, or at least genetics and all the other factors that are outside of human control. Hormones, various things that happen to you in the womb, things that are purely biological that don't involve conscious interference. And then nurture, which is how you're raised. I would argue that there's a third component that doesn't get enough consideration, which is choice. And here's why. There's a lot about your life you don't choose. That's absolutely true. I will say categorically, for the record, I never chose to be straight. Gay people don't choose to be gay. I didn't choose who my parents were. I didn't choose the socioeconomic environment that I grew up in. I didn't choose to be Caucasian. And there's a whole series of other influences on your life that you have no control over. But you can take two people, give you a real world practical example of my point. We know, and this is certainly true, and I'm not going to claim otherwise, that cycles of abuse tend to beget more abuse. Children of abusive parents, not always, many do not. Do not misunderstand me. But it's common. It's fairly, not all abused children grow up to be abusers. Many abusers were abused children. But here's my point. You can have a pair of identical twins raised in the same abusive household and not both be abusers. Same genetics, same nature, very similar nurture, different outcome. And there's a whole bunch of studies about twins that, in my opinion, draw into question nature versus nurture. One of the most common that's been done is about the nature of addiction. Many people in my audience have probably heard it said before, and I am absolutely a proponent of this, that addiction is a disease, although I'd say more precisely it's a form of mental illness. Why do they say that? There are studies that have been done of identical twins who alcoholic father, twins separated at a young age from the parents, raised in separate households. One winds up not being, there are much higher incidence of alcoholism, even if the households are raised in are not alcoholic. There is a fundamental aspect of there are people raised in similar circumstances with similar DNA, similar nature that maybe not choose in the most conventional sense. People tend to think, well, religion, again, not really something most people choose. Although you can, there's the thing. You can choose to change your religion. People do it. You can't wake up one day and go, I'm going to be an atheist now. But you can you can go through a series of logical progressions or emotional circumstances and stop being religious. You can. There are some things that are inborn. I'm 5'10". I can spend all day, every day for the next 50 years thinking about being 6'3", and I'm never going to go past 5'10". That's a reality. Sexual orientation. There's some flexibility there. More than I think anybody gives it credit for, by virtue of the fact that there's a bunch, there's things like the Kinsey scale and other studies that certainly suggest that our entire understanding of sexuality as two poles is completely ridiculous. And that even as three positions, heterosexual, homosexual, and bisexual, is ridiculous. And that, but it is a process. Yes, Lisa, becoming atheist is a process. It's a process you can go through. You can change. It's not necessarily a conscious choice, but it's not real. It's a series of responses to stimuli. How you respond isn't set in stone. It's a series. Being an atheist isn't a choice. Becoming an atheist is not a choice. It's a process. I agree with you. But that process is a series of choices. A common way many people go from being particularly young earth creationist to atheist, they start researching young earth creationism. They start researching the science of the Big Bang and evolution. That's a choice. And Lisa, I absolutely agree with you, and that's another point I was about to bring up. Lisa says even the gender thing is ridiculous. You're absolutely right. And that's the thing. Alfred Kinsey, for those of you who don't know, was an early sex therapist, basically, who did massive amounts of study on human sexuality and proposed a sliding scale of human sexuality, where at one end you had people that were completely heterosexual and one end people that are completely homosexual. And in his opinion, about 98% of the population fell between those two extremes. People since Kinsey haven't disagreed with his basic concept. What they've determined is even Kinsey, who created this entire scale, was thinking too simplistically. Because so you have your simple scale. Now add another axis to that because of gender identity. And certainly, again, Who you're attracted to is not a choice. The science is in on that. It's settled. It's not worth debating. Whether or not you act on that attraction is a choice. There are people who are sexually attracted to men and women who choose not to engage in sexual behavior. Well, asexuality is not a choice in and of itself. And I'm not, nor am I advocating it is. There are people that choose to live what effectively equates to an asexual lifestyle where they have no sex, or in practical terms, because they don't have sex or date or otherwise engage with that type of relationship with anyone. Not that I'm saying that chastity is the same thing as asexuality. They're not. Again, asexuality is an orientation, not a choice. There are homosexuals that, for a variety of social and psychological reasons, may engage in heterosexual sex and vice versa. That would be why I actually fundamentally disagree with people who say that free will is an illusion. Because as much as people tend to stay in whatever pigeonhole they were shoved in when they were born, people do change. People who grew up devoutly religious, who plan to go into ministry, become atheists. People who have been lifelong atheists have some sort of experience and become religious occasionally. Children of decades of abuse, of generations of abuse, stop abusing. Just because you're raised to see something as normal doesn't mean you're going to see it as normal. And again, it's the problem here. I think is the idea that free will amounts to single choice. I'm going to be an atheist now. That's not. Free will is a sum total of choices. It's not what you often as not. I think it's not a single choice. And for the record, I'm sure, Lisa, you agree with me. Lisa, you clearly agree with me. You said it yourself. Whether you believe in free will or not, atheism is a process. It's not a choice. It's a progression. But anyone who doesn't agree with me, who thinks atheism is a choice, or sexual orientation is a choice, if you're a religious person and you think atheism is a choice, try being atheist for the next hour. If you're a straight person or a gay person who thinks sexuality is a choice, try being gay or straight as applies to you for the next hour. Not engage in same-sex sexual activity or opposite-sex sexual activity. Try being biologically attracted to the gender you're not normally attracted to. Let me know in the comments how that works out for you. You can certainly feel attract, again, because it's a good example of my point. I keep coming back to it. I feel like I'm laboring it a little. But you can choose how you act on attraction. You can be not attracted to lots of people throughout history and in the world today have had sex with people they had no attraction to, for a range of reasons. You can change. You can't change. You may not be able to change your underlying desire, but you can change what you do with the desire. I'm not, in case this needs to be said, I don't think it does, because I am absolutely of the opinion that my listeners are intelligent people that don't need me to point out what to me is obvious. But in case an exception to this rule stumbles in, I'm not advocating that anybody decide not to be whatever you are. I'm not saying that if you're homosexual, don't have homosexual sex. I'm not saying that if you're religious, don't attend, stop attending church services, or if you're atheist, start attending them. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not making a moral judgment on attraction. I'm not making a moral judgment on how you act on that either. I'm just trying to explain the thought progression. Personally, I'm overwhelmingly of the opinion the consent, safe, sane, consensual, you do what you want. If it's between consenting adults, it's none of my business. It's none of the government's business. It's nobody's business except the consenting adult's business, really. And I got far more off topic than I thought I would. But that's okay. I thought I was going to have to make it a shorter episode because I wasn't sure how far I could run with this idea. But it's coming up on the end of the hour, so I think it's probably going to be a good time to bring it to a close. I want to thank everybody listening. Lisa for Truth, I want to thank you in the chat for keeping me on my toes and participating. Anyone who's listening in the future, please feel free to, we do it 6 o'clock on Mondays. We're going to, at this point, I'm going back to a regular weekly schedule. In theory, who the heck knows? Feel free to tune in if you can come live. I'm always active in the chat. Lisa for Truth is a good friend of mine, I'd say at this point, and a regular listener, has been interacting with me, and that's absolutely wonderful. I encourage that kind of thing. If you can't do it, there's always the comments below. Feel free to tell me what you're thinking. If you agree with me, tell me what you liked. If you don't agree with me, tell me what you don't like. If you think this whole thing is crazy, let me know that too. If you're wondering what the heck a basilisk is, for God's sakes, watch Harry Potter, people. Lisa, I would be honored to have you interview me. Just let me know when. But yeah, for those of you who don't know or who missed the connection, the basilisk is a mythical creature that is so poisonous, so venomous, that even looking at it in the eyes will kill you. This often gets reinterpreted as turn you to stone, but as far as I know in the folklore, no, it's just straight up lethal. You die. If you look at it in the eyes, you're going to die. So the idea, and it's got to be Facebook or email. I don't use Twitter. But the idea with this experiment is, if you know about the Roko's Basilisk, and you all now know because I've told you, its eye is upon you. You've drawn its gaze, and now you need to think about what you're going to do with that. Again, don't freak out. Email's in the description. Don't freak out. I've given you a whole bunch of reasons why I think this whole thing is ridiculous. You can go to Kyle Hill's channel, Because Science. He gives you a whole bunch more. There are plenty of other videos on the internet about how this idea, no compute. I don't want people freaking out. I just thought it was interesting, and wanted to talk about it. But that's going to do it for tonight. We will be back next week. I don't know what next week's topic is going to be. I've got a couple of guests that I'm poking, trying to get involved. I got a few other things in the works, but we will be here. If anything comes up, look at the community panel of this YouTube channel or the Paranormal Encyclopedia on Facebook, and I will put up an update as soon as possible if anything changes. But otherwise, that's going to do it for tonight. I want to thank everybody for listening in. As always, it's been a pleasure. This is Kevin Mears, demonologist in the Paranormal Encyclopedia. He is saying good night, everyone. God bless, and watch out for basilisks. Good night, everybody.